Imagine being targeted every single day, mocked, disrespected, treated like you don't belong. Now imagine rising from that pain to become the very leader who changes everything. This is the story of how a man went from being the department's target to becoming their new police chief. Stay with me. This is a story you won't want to miss. "Hey, rookie! Go grab us some coffee and donuts!" The voice came from a white officer leaning against a squad car. His buddies laughed, nudging each other like they'd just made the best joke of the day. They watched the tall black man in uniform pause, glance at them, and give a slight nod. "Sure," the man said calmly. "Cream and sugar, right?" They burst into laughter like they'd won something, like putting him in his place was part of a game. To them, he was just another new recruit, another face to ignore or mock, especially because of the color of his skin. What they didn't know was that he wasn't there to fetch coffee. His name was Marcus Ray, and he wasn't a rookie. He wasn't even a new officer. He was their new police chief. But Marcus didn't show up that morning in full-dress uniform. He arrived early, quietly, in a standard patrol outfit with no indication of rank. He'd told the mayor's office to hold off on the public announcement until the next day. He wanted to walk the station unnoticed, to see how the officers behaved. When they weren't performing for leadership, when they thought nobody important was watching, what he saw in just a few hours confirmed everything he feared. The first red flag wasn't even the rude welcome at the car. It was the look one officer gave him in the hallway, like he didn't belong. No greeting, no respect, just a cold stare and a slight scoff under the breath. Then, in the locker room, someone had muttered a slur under their breath when Marcus passed by. It wasn't loud, but it was clear enough. Later that day, another officer asked Marcus if he'd even passed the academy, or if they handed out badges with cereal boxes now. It was said with a chuckle, like a joke. But no one stepped in to stop it. No one said it was wrong. The other officers just laughed or looked away. At one point, an officer deliberately spilled coffee on his shirt and brushed it off with a sarcastic, "Oops, my bad, rookie." More laughter. Marcus just nodded again, brushing off the stain without a word. Every insult, every smirk, every joke that wasn't funny. They all told Marcus the same thing. These men thought power came from their badges, their seniority, their skin color. They thought this place was theirs. Marcus took note of every name, every face, every word. And he said nothing, because tomorrow, everything would change. The next morning, the entire department was called to the conference room for what was described as an important leadership announcement. Most officers showed up sluggish and unconcerned. Some scrolled through their phones. Others chatted quietly, wondering who the city had hired as the new chief. "Probably another old white guy from downtown," someone said near the back. "Let's just hope he doesn't make us sit through diversity lectures." The room fell, silent when the mayor walked in, flanked by a familiar face. "As you all know," the mayor began, "this department has been facing serious challenges, both inside and outside these walls. We need strong leadership. Someone who doesn't just understand policing, but understands people. Someone who knows what justice looks like when no one's watching." He turned, gesturing beside him. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your new police chief, Marcus Ray." A pause, a beat of disbelief. Then, mouths fell open. Coffee cups froze midair. A few officers straightened up in their seats, trying to hide their shock. Marcus stepped forward, this time in full chief's uniform. Gold badge, crisp jacket, presence commanding the room. He scanned the crowd slowly. "I recognize a few of you," he said, letting the silence hang. "Some more than others." No one spoke. Even the ones who mocked him the day before sat stiff, trying not to look guilty. Marcus didn't call anyone out. Not yet. He didn't have to. Over the next few weeks, everything changed. Marcus didn't. sit in his office behind a wall of glass. He was present, in the field, in the break rooms, reviewing body cam footage late into the night. He brought in new policies, new training, and most importantly, accountability. He started by pulling internal reports, complaints that had been swept under the rug, incidents that were never properly reviewed. Then he brought in members of the community to speak, to tell their stories, to be heard. He made sure officers were required to complete racial bias training, not just as a formality, but with real assessments and consequences. And he made it very clear. Racism, harassment, and abuse of power would no longer be tolerated. Period. Some officers adapted. They understood the message and worked to earn back trust. Others resisted, grumbling in private, complaining about changes and woke politics. And then there were the worst of them, the ones who thought they were untouchable. Marcus didn't confront them with words. He confronted them with evidence. Officer Blake, the one who asked for coffee, was one of the first investigated. Footage revealed a pattern. Traffic stops without cause, verbal harassment, threats, even one incident where he told a black teenager to get used to being pulled over. Blake was suspended, then charged. He left the building not with laughter but in handcuffs. Over time, the department began to transform. Trust in the community, long broken, started to heal. Officers who'd once stayed silent found the courage to speak up. And young recruits, especially recruits of color, no longer walked the halls with fear in their eyes. One day, a young black cadet stopped Marcus as he was leaving his office. "Chief," he said, "can I ask you something?" Marcus turned, nodding. "Why'd you come here? After seeing how they treated you? After everything?" Marcus smiled, not with bitterness, but with quiet strength. "Because sometimes," he said, "you have to walk into a place where you're not wanted, to make sure the next person is." He paused. "They made me a target for fun. They thought I was beneath them. But now they know respect isn't demanded. It's earned." And this time, no one laughed. Not because they were afraid, but because they finally understood. By the end of the day, Marcus had already been called boy 3 times. It wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was muttered under breath. Sometimes it was said with a smirk, hidden beneath sarcasm. But Marcus heard it. He heard every syllable, every tone, every intention. In the hallway near the lockers, an older officer passed him and said, "Watch it, boy. You're standing in the way." Marcus stepped aside without a word. Later, in the break room, another officer tossed him a used coffee cup and said, "Clean up for us, rookie. That's what boys like you are here for, right?" Marcus caught the cup midair, placed it in the trash, and nodded. And then, just before the end of his undercover first shift, the worst one came, Officer Blake. Blake was the loud type, the smug type, the kind of man who treated every situation like a locker room joke. He strolled right up to Marcus with a mocking grin and said loud enough for others to hear, "Hey, did you actually pass the academy? Or did they lower the bar for diversity hires?" The room went quiet for a beat. No one laughed right away. Not because it wasn't offensive, but because they were waiting to see how Marcus would react. A few glanced at each other nervously, unsure whether the rookie had any backbone. Then came the chuckles, the snickers, the exaggerated, "Just kidding, man," from Blake as if that erased what he'd said. But Marcus didn't laugh. He didn't clench his fists, didn't fire back a retort, didn't flash the badge tucked in his inside coat pocket with the title Chief of Police etched across the gold. No, he just smiled. Not out of agreement, not out of fear. He smiled the kind of smile that said, "You have no idea who you're talking to," because that was the point of this whole undercover day. To see who people really were when they thought they had the power. When they thought no one was watching. When they thought the person they were mocking couldn't do anything about it. Marcus had seen this behavior before. It wasn't new. It wasn't even shocking. What made it different this time was the uniform he was wearing and the title they didn't know he held. Chief Marcus Ray had spent 18 years in law enforcement. He'd worked patrol, homicide, internal affairs. He'd seen men like Blake in every department, men who laughed too loud, covered for each other, and made people like Marcus feel like outsiders, no matter how hard they worked, how many cases they closed, or how many years they served. But this time, Marcus wasn't walking in as an equal. He wasn't trying to fit in. This time, he was walking in to lead. He'd specifically asked the mayor and the city officials not to announce his appointment until the next morning. He wanted the real, raw version of this precinct. No masks, no fake smiles. No yes sirs from officers trying to impress their new boss. And now he had it. He'd walked the halls, listened quietly, watched the eyes that rolled when he spoke, watched who gave him directions and who gave him orders. He saw who treated him with basic human respect, and who saw him as just another diversity hire. It wasn't just about ego. It wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about something deeper, because Marcus remembered what it felt like to be a young black cadet, fresh in uniform, unsure of his place, and surrounded by laughter that wasn't meant to include him. He remembered the nights he drove home, gripping the wheel, his jaw tight, wondering if maybe, just maybe, he didn't belong. But he stayed. He studied harder, trained longer, climbed higher. Not because he wanted to be accepted, but because he wanted to build something better for the next kid who walked through these doors wearing that same uniform. So when Officer Blake smirked and slapped him on the back, saying, "You'll toughen up, boy. We all do," Marcus only nodded. He didn't say, "I'm your new boss." He didn't say, "You're finished tomorrow." He didn't say, "You've just made the worst mistake of your career." He didn't have to, because tomorrow, the name Marcus Ray would be on the station wall, on the brass plaque outside the chief's office, on every internal memo, every public address, every disciplinary report that came across his desk. Tomorrow, he wouldn't be the silent target of their jokes. Tomorrow, he'd be the one rewriting the rules, and those who thought he was beneath them would finally look up. Morning came too fast for most of them. Some shuffled into the conference room groggy, still wearing the weight of the previous night's beers and bad decisions. Others arrived annoyed, their radios clipped to their shoulders, hands still twitching for the patrol wheel. Being called off duty for a department-wide meeting was rare, and usually meant trouble. But no one expected what was about to happen. They gathered in groups, laughing, whispering, joking about what it could be. Officer Blake leaned against the back wall, arms crossed, chatting with a fellow officer about the rookie from yesterday, the tall black guy who, in his words, had soft hands and a quiet mouth. They all got a kick out of the way he just nodded along, didn't push back, didn't step out of line. Blake had told at least 3 different versions of his diversity hire joke already, and each time it landed with chuckles, even if a few laughs were nervous. The chatter quieted as the mayor walked in, flanked by the precinct captain and a few city officials. The mayor's expression was serious, composed. He stood at the front of the room, cleared his throat, and began speaking with authority and purpose. As you all know, this department has been through a lot in recent years. We've lost trust. We've made headlines for all the wrong reasons. And that has to change. A few officers shifted in their seats. Some looked down. Others just waited, expecting the usual speech about reform, policy updates, or budget shifts. Maybe a reminder to tighten up community relations. But this time, something was different. The mayor continued. Change starts with leadership, real leadership. Someone who understands the law, discipline, community, accountability. Someone who doesn't just wear the badge but lives by its meaning. He paused, smiled, and turned toward the side door. Please welcome your new police chief, Chief Marcus Ray. For a full second, the room was frozen. No reaction, No clapping, no movement. Then slowly, as Marcus walked in, this time not in plain patrol blues but in full chief's uniform, reality started to settle into their faces like the slow onset of a storm. His badge gleamed. His posture radiated confidence. He didn't walk like a man trying to prove himself. He walked like a man who had nothing to prove. Coffee cups stopped mid-air. Jaws slowly dropped. A few officers blinked like they weren't sure if they were, still dreaming. And Blake. Blake stood upright now, his arms falling stiffly to his sides. His mouth was slightly open, the blood draining from his face. The rookie from yesterday was now the most powerful man in the room, and Blake knew exactly what he'd said to him. He remembered every word, every smirk, every laugh. Marcus reached the front and turned to face the room. He took his time. His eyes scanned each face deliberately, calmly, methodically. "I recognize. A few faces," he said, his voice steady, resonant. He let the words hang in the air. His eyes stopped on Blake. Some more memorable than others. A few officers looked away. Some exchanged nervous glances, but most stayed silent, unsure of how to respond. The energy in the room had flipped. It wasn't just awkward, it was heavy, real. The kind of silence that came when people realized their masks had slipped at the wrong time. Marcus continued. "I came here early yesterday, not in this uniform, not with a title, just a man, just another face walking your halls." He walked forward slightly, closer to the crowd. And what I saw was exactly what I needed to see. He didn't yell. He didn't need to. His calm voice had more weight than any shout could carry. I saw men comfortable enough to make jokes that didn't belong in any station. I saw others stay silent while it happened. I saw behavior that's become so normal to some of you, you don't even flinch when it crosses the line. He let that sit for a moment. And I remember everything. Blake shifted uncomfortably. He wasn't the only one. A few officers who had laughed the day before were now looking down at their shoes, their confidence shrinking by the second. "This badge," Marcus said, tapping his chest, "isn't a pass. It's a promise to serve, to protect, and to uphold the values that define justice, not just on the street, but in this building every single day." He looked out over the room once more. "I didn't come here to make friends. I came here to fix what's broken, and make no mistake, some things in this department are broken, but they won't stay that way." He took one more step forward. "This isn't about revenge. I'm not here to get even. I'm here to lead. But understand this, respect isn't given because of your badge, or your seniority, or the color of your skin." He let the silence stretch again. Respect is earned. There was no applause when he finished. No clapping, no congratulations. Just silence. The kind of silence that only comes when people have to confront a truth they've been avoiding for too long. Marcus didn't need validation. He didn't expect cheers. He'd said what needed to be said. And now, he was in position to back it up. He nodded to the mayor, then turned and walked out of the room, his footsteps echoing through the stunned silence. Behind him, Officer Blake sat motionless. The smirk was gone. The jokes were over, and, for the first time in a long time, the room felt like it was finally under real command. In the weeks that followed, Chief Marcus Ray didn't hide behind the four walls of his new office. He wasn't the kind of leader who issued memos and waited for change to magically happen. No, he was on the ground, in the precinct, in the streets, in the community. He made sure people saw his face, not as a figurehead, but as a force. Marcus started where it mattered most, the truth. He began every morning in the evidence room, combing through hours of archived body cam footage, videos that had been brushed aside, complaints that were marked unfounded without any real review. He watched every second, eyes sharp, ears focused, not just for misconduct, but for patterns. The way some officers spoke to black and brown citizens, the difference in tone, the unnecessary aggression, the silence of those who stood by. Then, in the afternoons, he walked into neighborhoods the old department rarely showed up in, unless it was to arrest someone. He shook hands with grandmothers on porches, sat on folding chairs with barbershop owners. He listened to teenagers, to single mothers, to store clerks, to school janitors. He asked one question again and again. How did the police make you feel? At first, people hesitated. But once, they realized he wasn't there to defend or deflect. They opened up. Stories poured out about wrongful stops, rough handling, slow response times in black neighborhoods compared to others, and the fear that calling 911 might make things worse. Marcus didn't flinch. He took it all in. And when he returned to the precinct each evening, he carried those voices with him. He called emergency meetings. He reassigned patrol zones, especially in areas where trust had eroded the most. He shuffled supervisors, brought in external consultants, and most of all, he implemented a zero-tolerance policy for racism and abuse. He introduced diversity and inclusion training, not the kind where officers watched a slideshow and signed a form. These were real sessions, face-to-face, with community leaders, civil rights advocates, and former victims of profiling. They weren't comfortable. That was the point. But change wasn't just about education. It was about accountability. And Marcus made that clear. Soon, the internal investigations began, quietly at first. Then, with increasing speed, files that had collected dust were pulled, body cams were reviewed, civilian complaints were reopened, and one by one, the house began to clean itself. The same officers who had laughed at Marcus on his first day? Several were suspended, pending review of previous misconduct. 2 were demoted for excessive force incidents that had gone ignored for years. And a few? They were fired, not transferred. Not reassigned, fired. It sent a message. This wasn't just a rebrand. It was a reckoning. But the most dramatic moment came one Thursday morning. Marcus was in his office when his assistant knocked. There's a video you need to see. Just came in this morning. It was body cam footage. Less than 72 hours old. Officer Blake. Marcus's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He pressed play. The footage was clear. Daylight. A routine traffic stop. At least it should have been. A young black teen, maybe 17, was pulled over. No weapons. No threat. He spoke politely, hands visible, following every instruction. But Blake wasn't interested in safety. He barked orders, cursed at the teen, yanked the car door open before backup arrived. When the teen asked what he did wrong, Blake shoved him against the hood, hard, too hard. The kid's phone hit the pavement and cracked. The body cam caught every second. There was no justification, no visible crime, no call-in, just abuse of power, plain and ugly. Marcus sat in silence when the video ended. Then he stood. 10 minutes later, Blake was called to the main conference room. He walked in casually, still wearing that swagger, that half-smile. He thought it was just another briefing, another meaningless meeting, until he saw Marcus standing with 2 internal affairs officers and the city attorney. Marcus looked him in the eye. You're being relieved of duty, effective immediately. Blake's smirk fell away. For what? He scoffed. Marcus didn't blink. For violating department policy, for unlawful detainment, for excessive use of force, and for conduct unbecoming of an officer. Blake laughed, nervously. You serious? Over some punk kid who... Marcus raised a hand. The room went quiet. You didn't just harass a kid, Blake. You broke the law, and you broke the very oath you swore to uphold. 2 officers approached Blake from behind. He resisted for a second, then realized this wasn't a threat. It was already done. They took his badge, his weapon. Then, in front of every officer present, Officer Blake, The man who once mocked the rookie was escorted out of the station in handcuffs. The room was dead silent. Some watched with wide eyes. Others looked away, but no one said a word. And Marcus? He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He just turned, walked back to his office, and shut the door behind him. That day marked a turning point for the station, for the city, and for every officer who still thought that rank gave them permission to abuse. Marcus Ray had earned respect the hard way, and now he was using it the right way, to protect the people who needed it most, not with words, but with action. Months passed, and the precinct was no longer the place it had once been. Gone were the smirks behind closed doors, the quiet hallway whispers, the unchecked jokes passed off as tradition. In their place was a new energy, a steady, quiet professionalism that hadn't been there before. Attention had been lifted, replaced by accountability. And it wasn't just because of new policies or procedures. It was because of one man's presence. One man's refusal to let things stay the same. Chief Marcus Ray didn't take victory laps. He didn't walk around expecting praise. But the results spoke for themselves. Complaints from the community had dropped. Not a little, substantially. People were reporting better treatment, fairer stops, quicker response times. Businesses that once avoided calling for help were now partnering with community liaisons. Neighborhood associations were scheduling monthly meetings with patrol officers. People were shaking hands with cops instead of filming them with fear. Inside the station, morale had changed too. The bad apples were either gone or quiet. The good officers, those who had always wanted to do the right thing, felt a sense of purpose again. They no longer had to cover for their co-workers, no longer had to choose between speaking up and staying employed. They saw Marcus every day, not just as a superior but as a symbol, proof that leadership didn't mean domination, it meant direction. One afternoon, Marcus stood near the front entrance of the precinct, reviewing paperwork while sipping from a mug that read, "Earned, not given." He wasn't doing anything special, just working like any other day. A young cadet hesitated nearby. Fresh uniform, clean boots, bright eyes, nervous hands. Marcus noticed him but didn't speak first. He let the young man gather the courage to approach. Finally, the cadet stepped forward. "Sir?" Marcus looked up. "Yes? Can I ask you something?" "Of course." The cadet swallowed hard. "What made you come back to a place like this? I mean, after what you went through. After everything you saw?" Marcus didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned and looked out the wide front windows of the precinct. Outside, a group of kids were playing near a basketball court that had once been surrounded by patrol cars every other day. Now it was quiet, peaceful. He watched a patrol cruiser slowly roll past the kids. One of the officers inside waved. The kids waved back. Then Marcus turned back to the cadet. "I came back," he said slowly, "because someone has to be the first to walk through the fire so the next won't have to." The cadet's eyebrows lifted, a quiet curiosity behind his eyes. Marcus continued. "They thought making me a target was fun. They thought mocking me, challenging me, breaking me down would stop me. They thought if they made me feel like I didn't belong, I'd believe it." He paused for a moment, his voice still calm but firm. "But I didn't come here to be liked. I didn't come here to fit in. I came here to lead. And now," he looked the cadet in the eyes, "now they know the difference." The young man stood still, absorbing the words, nodding slightly. Marcus put a hand on his shoulder. "You're going to hear things, some whispers, some doubts, maybe even some of the same jokes I heard on my first day. Don't let them shake you." The cadet nodded again. "You don't lead with volume, you lead with value, with actions, with choices. Make the right ones, even when no one's watching, especially then. The cadet smiled, steadier now. "Thank you, sir," Marcus returned. The smile gave a nod and turned back toward the hallway. As he walked, he passed a wall that used to be bare. Now it displayed framed photos, one from every department outreach event in the past year. A Thanksgiving dinner hosted at the community center, a school supply drive run by officers in uniform, a candlelight vigil for victims of violence, where Marcus had stood shoulder to shoulder with both officers and civilians, not as separate groups, but as neighbors. And then, at the end of the hallway, another photo hung alone. Marcus, on his first official day in uniform as chief. No smile. Just focus. Below the photo was a quote he'd said during his first press conference. "Change doesn't come when you ask for permission. It comes when you show up prepared to carry it through." He didn't stop to admire it. He didn't have to. He knew the work wasn't done, not by a long shot, but progress was happening, and more importantly, it was sticking. Later that day, as he sat behind his desk, his assistant came in with a stack of letters, handwritten, not from officers, but from citizens, thank you notes, testimonials, stories from people who had once feared calling the police, but now felt heard, understood, protected. Marcus flipped through a few before setting them down. He didn't need them to feel validated, but they reminded him why he stayed the course, why he didn't quit, why he never yelled back when they called him boy, why he never let the smirks define him. Because real change isn't loud, it's steady, it's hard-earned, and sometimes it walks into a room wearing a uniform no one expected. But once it does, it never walks alone again. If this story moved, you don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories that inspire change. Your support helps us keep these voices heard. See you in the next one.